Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, Tuesday, May 16th, 2023. That's what the computer tells me, and, I believe anything the computer tells me. It's on the internet now, at this point, and so there's no disputing the truth about it. Okay, let's see. I don't know. There might be a little bit of news today, and I'm checking around for various sources on all of this stuff, not all of which made it parked into pocket in time for the morning show, but what can I tell you? It's a hectic time of year, and I don't know what else to tell you. There's lots of the high schooler is sort of up against the wall in terms of a rush of assignments that need to be completed before the last day. It's like the last day in which the teachers, some of the teachers anyway, say that they'll accept assignments. So, one of those things. I don't know what happened to high school kids since I went. I don't know. I was always like, back in my day, I guess they did there as a means of preparing you for college, where professors just say, I either won't accept work past the deadline, or I will dock you a grade per day that it's late or something like that. That's what our teachers did. And look where we got to in America with that. And now, I guess the new approach to things, which, whatever, I don't know. We just graduated one from college under the same conditions, essentially, and he did fine, more than fine, so everything, I guess, works out in the end. But these days, the teachers let the work come in whenever, except for when it's the end of the year. There has to be a deadline, of course, or when grades are due, et cetera, et cetera. Hasn't really done wonders for developing the work habits of the kids. And high schooler is chronically late with his assignments, but it doesn't seem to matter, and it's hard to argue with him. And, of course, the college kid, now not a college kid, went through the same thing and wasn't as chronically late with everything, but also likewise said, the teachers tell you when you have to really, really, really turn it in. And he did it, and it all works out, and so the educators appear to know something about what they're doing, and we'll trust them. Good job, educators. I'm a little worried. But, what should I be doing? My feet up, relaxing? I have a kid to get through school here. There's work involved in that, and I understand it. Okay, thanks, partners in education. I appreciate it. It's a little stressful. But, okay, let's see. So as I was collecting news this morning, there were many things that I began filing away. And what I didn't file away, but should have, is that Rudy Giuliani is in trouble again. I don't know whether that's something Joan's going to want to talk about. She may want to talk about things happening in Congress or other jerks, but I know she always takes some special pleasure in seeing Giuliani get tripped up. Now, I have a couple of different reports here. The reports that made it front and center this morning that reminded me, are from Raw Story. Raw Story, of course, wouldn't have been, not of course, but as it happens, is not the ones that broke the story. I don't actually know. And I was looking around, who broke the story? Who was the first one out with it? And I don't know anymore. But everybody's got it. And, there's an awful lot. Where is this is another one. All right. Well, let's see. There's sexual harassment allegations. There's, money laundering allegations. I see NBC News goes with the headline of Giuliani accused of offering to sell Trump pardons for $2 million each in a new lawsuit. And they use the subheader to inform you about the sexual harassment part. The suit includes allegations of sexual assault, pardon me, step it up a bit, sexual assault and harassment, as well as wage theft and discussions of plans to overturn the 2020 elections. That seems like a lot. The Raw Story entry that I had from this morning. Is it this morning? Yeah. Was lawsuit against Giuliani could also reveal money laundering, Ukraine meddling. I mean, I guess we all must have known that that was happening. That was how he originally got himself in trouble. And Trump's election fraud, according to the accuser, and Sarah Burris, who put this report together. Shall we start with the raw? I'm going to start with the raw story angle because they always go for the raw angle. And get to it quite quickly. So let's see. A new lawsuit filed Monday against Rudy Giuliani, alleging all that stuff that NBC said. So, they're on the same page. Wage theft, sexual harassment, money laundering, selling of pardons. I think that one escaped my notice at first. And a number of other accusations by former staffer Noelle Dunphy. And I'm trying to think of, do we know her? Have we mentioned her name? Do we know who that is? It's not the other one that I can't remember the last name of, but Christiana or whatever. But were they friends? Did they know one another? Are they working together at the same time? I can't remember. Was she the one in the room with him when he was getting punked by Borat? I don't know. Giuliani responded, of course, by saying that she had never worked for him. So that sounds like that part of the case ought to proceed pretty quickly. Now, the lawsuit, to be clear, it's about Rudolph Giuliani, as described, luring this woman whom he finds attractive into working for him. That sounds familiar. I must say, there's been a bit of a pattern. And if it's a civil suit, we're going to be able to talk about that pattern, I think. Promising, by the way, to pay her $1 million a year. Yowza. I mean, first of all, you probably shouldn't believe that, but, what can I tell you? I don't know. He has maybe, she came to believe that he had access to that kind of money. But he tells her, I'll pay you $1 million a year, but I can't pay you right now because I'm trying to hide money from my wife while I'm in divorce proceedings, apparently. That's the paraphrase. According to, let's see. It's MSNBC host Lawrence O'Donnell recounting the events and allegations in the suit. And if she just waits until the divorce is over, which is way more than a year in the story that is told, then she will be paid retroactively all the money she's owed. And wow, when it comes to $1 million, you really just have got to get something better than that promise. But anyway, Dunphy's lawyer, Justin Kelton, explained that for conversations outside of the ones that Ms. Dunphy recorded, there were witnesses that they'd already spoken to or would speak to. You really need to get those ducks lined up, I think, so that they would cooperate. And guess who's on the list? This is like blast from the past. He specifically mentioned Lev Parnas, who was released from prison in February, and we missed it, and we didn't celebrate it or not celebrate it or express consternation or resentment of it. I'm not certain where we are with Lev Parnas these days. Anyway, he also noted that Dunphy was given some smaller cash payments so that they would not be traceable, but not $1 million, I guess. The case is about these labor law violations and denial of wages. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace. It's about sexual harassment sexual assault. I'm sorry. I was going to say, he just repeats himself. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace in this case. Well, I know that. He just said it. But no, it is also about sexual assault in this case. And we'll see how the rest of the allegations come together, but it makes a certain amount of sense, right? I mean, he finds her attractive, he hires her. That's the kind of guy Rudy Giuliani is at bottom. That's the kind of guy a lot of people are, unfortunately. And he's more forward about it than most and probably blames it on his being old-fashioned and yada yada, which is to say that everybody was always assaulting everybody all the time back then, and it was terrible. Don't say and we got along just fine. No, it was horrible. And we were supposed to evolve out of it, and I guess Rudy hasn't yet, and a lot of people haven't. It's a chronic problem. Anyway, you know that. What I was going to say was that it makes a certain amount of sense knowing the kind of person he is, that then he offers $1 million. What in the world does she have to offer that's worth $1 million as working for Rudy Giuliani, and we don't really know anything about her other than he finds her attractive? He's gonna be harassing her. Here's $1 million so that I can harass you, which is not to excuse it by any means. and not to accuse her of not understanding the situation. I mean, the guy offers you $1 million. He's got a reputation to uphold. He doesn't say, I'm going to be harassing you all the time. And when he does, apparently she lets him know how she feels about that. And then when it escalates to assault, she sues him. So I don't know. But here's the thing. And this can and shouldn't be held against you in court when you sue him for the things he did. But for the future, for others, I would say, don't work for Rudy Giuliani. It's a bad idea in general, even if he doesn't find you attractive. But if he does, it's a horrible idea because he doesn't do any work. So there's really he's got no business hiring anybody to help him do anything. And if he also finds you attractive, well, he's going to bother you. He's going to pester you. He's a sex pest and a pervert, and you should stay away from him. And if you don't, you're still entitled to not have him harass and assault you. So if he does, sue him for it and get the hell out the door as fast as you can. All right. So these cases, O'Donnell continued in his show, are about these labor law violations and denial of wages. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace and sexual assault in the workplace in this case. All of this other information is packed into this lawsuit for, among other reasons, to actually prove that she did work for Giuliani, because Giuliani apparently is saying she was never an employee. O'Donnell explained, maybe I should move on to one of the news reports. I don't need O'Donnell to tell, although he does so in spectacular fashion. He does summarize things nicely. All right. O'Donnell explained that the excuse is that if she never worked for him, then workplace sexual harassment laws don't apply. Wow. Kelton called it absurd. Given the detail that Dunphy has, particularly the recordings, it makes it fairly clear that she was an employee, the lawyer explained. While there are recordings, another piece of information that Dunphy has are about 23,000 emails from members of Trump's inner circle, as well as others like Fox News hosts. There's a lot in them, the lawyer explained. Over 23,000 emails. There's a lot. A lot of the emails are expressly marked as confidential or not for disclosure or distribution. Keep that in mind, or rather keep in mind that at the time, and then O'Donnell cuts him off to ask if it would be relevant to the case to reveal emails that were about Donald Trump, and Kelton said some might be relevant. But I guess where he was trying to go was probably all these other people from the Trump inner circle and Fox News hosts were addressing her or copying her on the emails because it was understood that she was an employee. That's probably where he wanted to go with that argument. But O'Donnell didn't want to let him for some reason. Discussing the case, so this is a report of what Lawrence O'Donnell had to say about things, which, all right. Well, I didn't watch it, so it's news to me. In discussing the case, O'Donnell had a question for Andrew Weissman, remember him, the former senior prosecutor for special counsel Robert Mueller's team, about some of the allegations and details in the court filing. And I'm sure that he did. He specifically asked if someone in the Southern District of New York, remember the Sovereign District of New York, as Greg likes to call it, would be flipping the pages to read about the money laundering allegations. And, gosh, we don't know. But I assume so. All right. Absolutely, Weissman explained. So, the things that you covered are already... So the things that you covered already, which are about, there we are, the recordings and emails are going to be, I'm 100% certain, is going to be of interest to state and federal prosecutors for the reasons you laid out. I was particularly interested in paragraph 96. I liked it too because 96, whatever. It's an awesome number. Okay. Paragraph 96, where there is, is 96 not nice? I don't know whether there's an opposite phrase that we say for things like that. Anyway, where there's a description of the emails and who they are either to, from, or about. So that's exciting. It includes Rupert Murdoch, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson. I feel like an announcer for the network. And it also seems to include a lot of allegations that are relevant to what Rudy Giuliani was doing in Ukraine, which I'd love to have an explanation for. There is a discussion of a presidential candidate in Ukraine and a number of the lawyers who were involved in Ukraine activities who were helping Giuliani. So that is something that people are going to be, I think, very interested in. I remember that, what's his name, got impeached for that whole Ukraine thing the first time. He also mentioned electronics and whether there were any emails that Dunphy has that were deleted from Giuliani's communications. That'd be of interest. But that's all we have that's all we find out from the raw story report on this stuff. I now sort of feel like maybe we jump over to the NBC News reporting of it. I don't know. Well, let's see. I mean, there's that. There's also, I mean, who should we hear from? Who's dependable enough to read on this? Politico? Is that helpful? I don't know. CBS News, MSNBC, of course, is Lawrence O'Donnell, so we heard all about that from Raw Story. NBC News, the regular, normal broadcast network news arm related to MSNBC. So do we go further afield? Go to New York One, USA Today, Business Insider. Who should we here? How about Reuters? Maybe we'll do the Politico version. See what they have to say. They're usually in the business of covering tracks for Republican operatives in many cases. Let's see whether they decide to go the other direction on this one. Former Giuliani employee alleges sexual assault and harassment in $10 million lawsuits. We have a figure for it now. Let's see. It comes again from Noelle Dunphy. Said she was hired by the New York City mayor in January of 2019. I mean, we knew he was a scumbag at that point, but I guess we didn't know how scummy a scumbag he was up until, 2019. Had the Borat thing? I don't know. That's not really actually related to this lawsuit, but it would have. Anyway, let's see. Goodness. A former employee of Rudy Giuliani suing him for $10 million over allegations of sexual assault and harassment, wage theft, and other misconduct, including several instances that were recorded. Dunphy was hired by him in 2019. From the start, Giuliani, quote, worked aggressively to hire her, offering her a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work for an annual salary of $1 million as his director of business development, Dunphy alleges. Well, he's a big grifter, he had plans to be an even bigger grifter. I guess it's possible if as the director of business development, that is to say, help me book all these grifts, and I'm planning on grifting $10 million a year. I'll give you $1 million out of that. I guess it's possible. It was an opportunity that was too good to pass up, according to the filing. But the offers were a sham, motivated by Giuliani's desire to, quote, pursue a sexual relationship with Dunphy, and the abuse began almost immediately, she alleges. The 70-page filing details multiple instances of sexual harassment and assault, including accusations that Giuliani forced Dunphy. Wow. Well, good morning, everybody. It's it gets triggering, I guess, at this point, and I was just reading, as I'm saying, reading out again, sexual harassment and assault, and I really should have said something, I guess by now you've figured it out, and if you are having difficulty listening to the report about it, you're probably gone by now, but if you have a less sensitive trigger, now's the time to start thinking about it as we find out what exactly did Giuliani demand of her, and what was he, I guess, from his point of view, I guess, successful, I don't know, in actually forcing on her. And, well, it's the sorts of things that you would think that a jerk like Giuliani would demand of an attractive assistant. So there you go. And it's sexual in nature, and what can I tell you? And, yes, well, it's not always exclusively related to one particular type of sexual act, but it's one that almost every time I see it referred to in news reports when they're trying to, clean it up enough to print in a newspaper, it is described as a performance, let's say. You are demanded to perform this particular sexual act, and it's no more of a performance as far as I can tell than anything else. And but hey, I don't know why the performance is usually associated with this, but okay. And my word, this is disturbing, given one, the nature of the harassment and assault, and two, it's Rudy Giuliani at the other end of this, and it's really gross. And honestly, if he asked you to shake hands, I would feel skeeved out by it, but that's not what he asked for. This performance. Okay, so she, but it says here that Giuliani forced her to do this. So there's the assault. That's really bad. Where did it happen? In his Upper East Side apartment. Wow, even grosser. I hate sexual activity in the Upper East Side. I don't know. I'm trying to lighten the mood a little bit here, but there's a sexual assault that's taken place. Also, by the way, this happened while he took phone calls, which is sort of interesting, and harkens back a little bit to, I feel like he's trying to emulate, like he's been saying all his life, the real crime of Bill Clinton's desecration of the office. Well, he's not president of the United States, of course. But the real crime was that he was, doing it. The real crime was that Rudy Giuliani, wasn't getting the same. So apparently he decided to do it this way. While I'm making phone calls, I want you, let's say, under the desk or wherever he was seated when he was making his phone calls. And now you can understand what exactly, if the performance hint didn't give it away, this will do it. So, wow. So while he took phone calls, how pleasant for those who were on the other end of the line. Giuliani aggressively pursued a sexual relationship. That's more than aggressively pursuing a sexual relationship. But, and made clear that satisfying his sexual demands was a requirement of her job. And that's the sort of thing that gets you in trouble. He continually pressured her into sex and was unconcerned about whether Dunphy had given consent, the complaint says. Every opportunity to hit him over the head with a stapler or something heavy, bookends, etc. So remarkable restraint that she did not, though I'm sure she would tell you it was more about fear than anything else, unfortunately. Mayor Giuliani's lifetime of public service speaks for itself, and he will pursue all available remedies and counterclaims. Communications advisor Ted Goodman told the AP. Whatever happened to they didn't send out Christiana or whatever her name was in order to handle the reaction to this? That's odd. In addition to his sexual demands, Giuliani went on alcohol-drenched rants that included racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic remarks. Terrific. Many of which were recorded, according to the filing. So that will be fun. Dunphy also alleges in the complaint that Giuliani put her in charge of his email, giving her access to highly sensitive information, including correspondence between Giuliani and then President Trump, as well as several Trump advisors. According to the lawsuit, Giuliani also told Dunphy he was able to break laws because he had immunity. And he claimed that he was selling pardons for $2 million, money he and Trump would split. I just, at this point, hang them both and dump them in the ocean? Okay, thank you. Just a little, that's my opinion section for today. But you don't have to agree. You might be anti-capital punishment. And we'll talk about it afterwards, and I'll beg your forgiveness once they're, at the bottom of the sea. Giuliani also repeatedly told Dunphy not to speak with the FBI, the lawsuit alleges, when she told Giuliani that FBI agents had visited her family's home in Florida looking to question her. He demanded that she not speak to or cooperate with them and claimed that one or two of the agents were going to, quote, get totally destroyed. The complaint filed in New York State Court names Giuliani, his companies, and 10 unidentified individuals in New York. So there you go. Filed in New York, and it's not a criminal complaint, I don't think, although I guess I could look it up and take a look at it. But I think it's just, it's a lawsuit. So not like it would have been pardoned anyway, but it's, I don't know, it's somewhat important that it's happening in New York State Court as opposed to federal court, I guess. And Trump has appointed no judges in New York State courts, so at least we have that. All right, so what a way to start off the day, finding out that Rudy Giuliani is, not finding out, but hearing more about how he's such a perv. And that makes it a lot easier to believe the real story rather than the story he tried to pass off about the Borat filming. But okay, I think you probably already believed the story he wanted to deny that time around anyway. So establishing a weird and wild pattern. All right, so other things that I put away in Pocket, and I don't think this even made it to Pocket, but there are several others. Let's see. One I'll reserve perhaps to see whether Joan wants to talk about it. But last week when Joan was around, she recommended this interesting article that she was just getting around to reading at the time, and I thought I would read it earlier. But I haven't, but now I feel like I really need to do a little bit of homework on it and give you at least a little bit of the background, even if we don't read through the entirety of the thing, just so we know where Joan was coming from last week, which will give us perhaps some indication of where she is this week. But she thought it was very interesting that The Intercept had reported last week more about Clarence Thomas, that Clarence Thomas's billionaire benefactor, Harlan Crow, bought citizenship in an island tax haven. I had wondered when she mentioned it whether it was Dominica, right? They say it differently. It's not Dominica. It looks like Dominica, like Dominican Republic. But it's not the Dominican Republic. It's an island all unto itself, and they call it Dominica for some reason. And that's not it anyway. But as it turns out, right, we shouted out because I skimmed the story that it was from St. Kitts and Nevis. And let's see a little bit about the sale of the thing and see whether any of our familiar actors are working in it. What was that guy's name? Paolo Zampoli or something like that. He's the one working for Dominica and involved in the sales of citizenships there. But maybe we will find a familiar actor in here as we approach our first break. Jason Palladino and Ken Klippenstein are the writers on the piece for The Intercept. Let's see. So, the one, he became a dual citizen of the U.S. and the island nation of St. Kitts and Nevis as recently as last year, according to unearthed documents. In 2012, Crow and his family were granted passports for St. Kitts and Nevis, a tax haven known for impenetrable financial secrecy. Well, we'll have to see about that. Anyway, we're about 5 seconds behind on the music as a result of my fumbling around with this story, so we'll cut out a little earlier than usual and perhaps give myself 2 minutes to scan through some of this and see if is there more to the story. I mean, there always is when there's sudden moves for dual citizenship involved, but let's see if we can unearth what that is. I love that description. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We come back in a little weird in the music too. And so how's my skimming going over the last 2 minutes? Well, okay, I got distracted. So I'm going to see if we can't read through this relatively quickly and figure out what is up with Harlan Crow and I guess maybe why he selected St. Kitts and Nevis versus other tax havens. That would be of some interest. But in 2012, they begin near the top of this article. I skipped the introductory paragraph. Crow and his family were granted passports for St. Kitts and Nevis in 2012. Now, I got the idea that this was in the last year or so. Oh, yes, right. I see. So what they were saying in their investigation was that as recently as last year, he was still considered a dual citizen, and they're not certain of his current status, I guess is what they're trying to say. All right. In 2012, Crow and his family were granted passports for St. Kitts and Nevis, a tax haven known for impenetrable financial secrecy. Come on, privateers of the Caribbean. I think we can get through this financial secrecy. This all through a cash for citizenship scheme. Documents provided to the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation. Hope I got that pronunciation near correct. By a whistleblower as part of its passport papers investigation and reviewed by the Project on Government Oversight, or POGO, as they like to call themselves, and The Intercept. because they're the ones doing the reporting, suggest Crow and his brother, Trammell S. Crow, I guess Jr., probably, or maybe the S is different from the father. Anyway, paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's it. That's pocket change for those guys. For the passports, financial transparency experts say the island's tax regime would make tracking Crow's assets, including gifts to Supreme Court justices, extremely difficult. So I think we just have a summary execution. What do you guys say? Hey, it's the right will agree because they're in love with authoritarianism and we're just doing their thing. We've finally come around to their position. The documents were leaked from Henley and Partners, a London-based firm known for assisting the ultra-wealthy in obtaining golden passports, which allow the holders to shield assets from their home country's tax authorities. The firm advertises itself as the global leader in residence and citizenship by investment, and that makes Jared Kushner angry because he wanted to move into that business for himself. Anyway, the firm advertises itself as, this global leader in this crap and has been shown to do business with controversial clients, an organized crime and corruption reporting project. Remember them? The folks who do all the reporting on Russian and Eastern Bloc organized crime. We refer to them all the time. And is Alexander Navalny's, is that his operation? Or is he just affiliated in some... you may have better memory of that than I do. But at any rate, the excellent reporters there did their own investigation using the leaked documents reported that the firm was working, this is Henley and Partners, with a rogues gallery of accused financial criminals from around the world. And maybe just plain murderers, if you're talking about Russian mobsters, for instance. An investigative journalism collaboration also based on a leaked trove of Henley documents reported that oligarchs, fugitives, and sanctioned business people were among the clients seeking foreign passports. The passports granted in 2012 would expire after 10 years unless renewed. Aha! That's where the uncertainty comes from. It's unclear if the Crow family renewed them last year. And that's the way it is with passports generally. But, I guess if it's a scam for money, you're going to want that money every once in a while. Maybe I would have made it 5 years just to get more money out of these people. All right. The revelation of Crow's history as a dual citizen of a nation considered to be one of the world's most secretive tax havens raises new questions about the lavish, undisclosed gifts to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, first revealed by ProPublica. On Monday, Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden, oh boy, he's really going to get into this. I say oh boy from the Crow's perspective on this. Good choice for us. Although it does tend to, end in sternly worded letters occasionally as well. But okay. And here's one. He sent a letter to Crow seeking evidence that Crow, quote, complied with all relevant federal tax and ethics laws, something his dual citizen status is sure to complicate. He'll say I did, and he might even be telling the truth because he'll be claiming that he's actually subject to St. Kitts and Nevis tax law, not American tax law. Ask him what's the greatest country in the world. He'll tell you it's the United States of America. You might ask, why do you pretend to be a citizen of and hold all your assets through St. Kitts and Nevis? And he'll say, well, the one place where America sucks is taxes, I guess. All right, Gimme-tarian through and through. The American public deserves a full accounting of the full extent of your largesse towards Justice Thomas, including whether these gifts complied with all relevant federal tax and ethics laws, Wyden wrote to Crow in that sternly worded letter, demanding answers. We'll see whether he gets any. And the demand was for a return of those answers by May 8th. This is actually a late April article. So this might have been what it was that interested Joan so much. Last week would have been May 8th. The deadline for his response. Maybe she knows whether or not he bothered to respond. Anyway, even among tax havens, it says St. Kitts and Nevis is considered high risk by regulators, once even appearing on a financial stability forum list of countries that were non-cooperative with global efforts to fight money laundering and financial crime. They're pirates down there. Well, it's good tradition. In 2018, the European Union moved the nation to a list of non-cooperative jurisdictions, citing its harmful preferential tax regime. A 2018 investigation in The Guardian dubbed it the world's most secretive offshore haven. I hope they're stealing a lot of their money from these billionaires in exchange for this secrecy. a couple $100,000, I'm sure it goes a long way in St. Kitts and Nevis and everything, but it seems like pretty low to be charging billionaires for passports that entitle them to, millions of dollars in tax savings. They should at least get as much as Rudy Giuliani was promising Noelle Dunphy, don't you think? Okay. Anyway, even when tens of thousands of St. Kitts and Nevis business documents appeared in the Paradise Papers leak, company ownership was still hidden because the jurisdiction keeps so little information filed. And they know how to do information security down there in St. Kitts and Nevis. Don't give us this information. That way, we can't lose it in a leak. We'll lose the other stuff in a leak, but the really good stuff, keep for yourself. International business tycoons and politicians who have looted the assets of their nations and other high-wealth individuals who have simply looted their neighbors, presumably. Though, honestly, anybody who's a billionaire in this country has also looted the assets of our nation. They just don't think so because they think that they shouldn't be paying taxes. But the tax money that they kept in their pockets, where Republicans say, you keep your hard-earned dollars in your pockets, and the rest of us recognize, no, actually, that should have been paid in taxes. You're looting the Treasury. Well, international business tycoons and others like that have used the dubious network of offshore tax havens across the world, which includes St. Kitts and Nevis, to hide their assets and income. That, according to Representative Hank Johnson of Georgia, of course, ranking member of the House Judiciary Subcommittee overseeing the courts. Harlan Crow didn't respond to any questions about his citizenship arrangement. There's no evidence that Crow's dual citizenship is connected to any illegal activity. We have yet to make any of that activity illegal, I guess. A review of Supreme Court cases involving dual citizenship and taxation do not show any obvious signs of influence by Crow or favorable decisions by Thomas, but the existence of the potential conflict of interest is alarming to ethics experts. How Clarence Justice Thomas may have benefited? Well, let's find out. That's the next section. Thomas has enjoyed one of Crow's overseas assets registered in another tax-efficient jurisdiction. The billionaire's 162-foot luxury yacht, the Michaela Rose, that Thomas and his family spent a 9-day trip on in Indonesia in 2019, is owned by Rochelle Marine Limited, a company domiciled in Guernsey, a British protectorate in the Channel Islands, known for minimal taxation and maximum secrecy. Blame the British for that. It's their protectorate. If tax avoidance and secrecy are what Harlan Crow is seeking, it might be no coincidence that concurrently, and for more than 2 decades, Justice Thomas has been concealing the full extent of his financial relationship with Harlan Crow, said Johnson. Okay. I mean, it's something to say, but it's a little tenuous. Who recently introduced, that was Hank Johnson, by the way, who recently introduced legislation in the House that would create ethics and transparency rules for Supreme Court justices. The public interest requires that financial relationships between Supreme Court justices and people like Harlan Crow be publicly disclosed. Well, it's a nice comment. Let's see what happens. According to NPR, the value of Thomas's undisclosed gifts could total over $1 million, and ProPublica's investigation valued the Indonesia trip alone at $500,000. ProPublica later revealed that in 2014, one of Crow's companies purchased and renovated Thomas's mother's home. We know about that one. In addition to buying several lots on the street, CNN then reported that the justice's mother doesn't pay any rent and still resides in the home. Thomas didn't disclose the sale on his ethics form despite co-owning the home prior to the sale. Thomas has said that his failure to report gifts he accepted from Crow did not violate the law because he didn't have business before the court. But in 2005, the architecture firm appealed the Supreme Court, to the Supreme Court, I guess, in a case alleging misuse of copyrighted designs and sought $25 million in damages from Trammell Crow Residential, a firm founded by Crow's father and in which the Crow family was invested at the time. Okay, so I guess an architecture firm said that they stole their designs. Let's see. The court, including Thomas, who did not recuse himself, voted to deny the petition. Crow's not just a close friend of one of the most powerful judges in the country. He's also a prolific political donor, as you may have heard, personally giving over $10 million by ProPublica's estimates, largely to conservative causes, and that's only the publicly disclosed donations. So, hey, there could be 4. While current law forbids political giving or expenditures by foreign nationals, it does not preclude dual citizens who hold U.S. passports from doing so. About that dual citizenship, The financial secrecy afforded by dual citizenship could allow Crow's accounts in third-party countries to remain invisible to regulators in the United States. Crow oversees several financial entities in another small Caribbean island nation, also known for its tax avoidance policies. 3 investment funds belonging to Crow Holdings, the real estate conglomerate on which Crow serves as chair, are located in the Cayman Islands. According to the IRS's Foreign Financial Institution list. One of the entities is an offshore feeder fund, a type of foreign investment fund that shields investors from certain domestic taxes. Pay your fair share, you. A company founded by Crow's late father, Trammell Crow, also lists a subsidiary in the Cayman Islands. Feeder funds generally refers to an offshore fund that then buys onshore funds. It's a way for foreigners to buy U.S. investments without normal reporting requirements, said Sarah Alexander, a partner at Constantine Cannon, whose practice focuses on international financial misconduct. In practice, it's also a way to shield assets, and there's lots of U.S. persons who shouldn't be there. A very small percentage of American citizens hold dual citizenship with another country, and a key question is why Mr. Crow acquired St. Kitts and Nevis passports for himself and his family, said Elise Bean, former staff director and chief counsel at the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. U.S. passports already enable U.S. citizens to visit a lot of countries without a visa, and there's no indication Mr. Crow or his family plan to buy a house in St. Kitts and Nevis, so what's the purpose? For a U.S. citizen, gaining a St. Kitts and Nevis passport would allow less restricted access to only a few countries, like Russia, Iran, and Belarus, according to data compiled by the Passport Index. So it's not about travel. What about this payments for passports thing? To obtain golden passports in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Crow family paid into the Sugar Industry Diversification Fund, one of several options for the Citizenship by Investment program at the time. And don't forget, we have such a program here in the United States as well. According to internal Henley and Partners documents, that program and the law firm that had the exclusive rights to sell citizenship through donations have faced questions of self-dealing. The fund, controlled in part by lawyers associated with the firm, made several investments into companies connected with the chair of Henley and Partners, according to an organized crime and corruption reporting project investigation, and the arrangement was eventually terminated. That's interesting. So, you see how this starts, right? Okay, so I imagine what this is telling us is that St. Kitts and Nevis previously maybe had a little bit of a monoculture thing going on. It was sugar plantations, essentially, and I'm sure that goes way back to colonial times and totally connected to slavery. And, these days, I guess, continues, at least in the sugar industry. But, and this would not be a bad choice on the part of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Let's diversify from the sugar industry. Let us, to the extent we're able to raise capital at all, pool it in a sugar industry diversification fund so that, we're not, everything in the country isn't tied to the price of sugar. And, I guess that becomes something like, akin to the sovereign wealth funds that, Jared Kushner loved tapping into from the Middle East and the Arabian Peninsula. And, I guess then, so Henley and Partners was selling the golden passports and getting paid, for that service. And the money that people paid in, one of the options, I guess you could pay into several things, was the Sugar Industry Diversification Fund. So you'd get a billionaire to buy a golden passport. The money lands in the Sugar Industry Diversification Fund, some amount of it as commission, I'm sure, going to Henley and Partners. And then the fund itself was, I guess they said, well, we'll put some of these people on the board. And Henley lawyers ended up on the board controlling, at least in part, the Sugar Industry Diversification Fund. And some of the investments that they directed this Sugar Industry Diversification Fund to make were in companies connected to the chairman of Henley and Partners. So that's another way of skimming off the top. And, of course, that's illegal under, most places under self-dealing statutes. So, okay. Documents reviewed by Pogo and The Intercept show payments of approximately $500,000 for the Crow's family passports, a small price to pay when considering the potential savings to be had by avoiding pesky estate inheritance, income, or wealth taxes. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis criticized the investments of the fund, telling Parliament it was as if the money intended to help residents of the island's transition from the sugar trade had been given away. That's actually stolen. You can go ahead and say so. In 2014, 2 years after the Crow family paid for St. Kitts passports, the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network raised the alarm on the practice. The financial regulator was concerned about Iranian nationals using the system to mask their identity and geographic background for the purpose of evading U.S. or international sanctions or engaging in other financial crime. Well, you will have strange bedfellows, to say the least. And I guess it must be interesting to see the St. Kitts and Nevis government pleading, you should arrest these guys. They're self-dealing. They're stealing the money straight back. And I'm sure that part of the plan was for Henley and Partners and others like them to say, well, you're engaged in shady dealings yourself, so maybe you don't want to raise that alarm. But who's going to arrest them for under St. Kitts and Nevis law? Probably the Prime Minister will be allowed to call this out, and it's likely Henley and Partners that will be in more trouble. Now, whether or not they can bring them to justice in any way is highly doubtful, at least under St. Kitts and Nevis law, unless the International Court of Justice were to swoop in and do something. And I don't know how much pull St. Kitts and Nevis has with the ICC or ICJ. Anyway, that same year, Canada decided to require St. Kitts and Nevis citizens to obtain a visa to enter the country. There's Canada stepping up for you. What do you think of that, Ricky? Oh, by the way, yes, I mentioned Ricky because she mentioned yesterday when we were talking about, in passing, about the weird enclave thing that the Russians were thinking of building an enclave for right-wingers from the U.S. and Canada to abscond to, if necessary or desirable, and made it sound like we weren't aware somehow that, Canada has right-wing nut jobs too. We are aware of that. That's true. I guess it was just a weird inclusion to me because, one, I think probably the vast majority of people who would want to relocate from the United States to Russia as expat right-wing fugitives, probably Americans, you got plenty, but there's no reason, I don't think, at this point for them to be fleeing Canadian jurisdiction, unless it's that maybe the Canadians are being actually more aggressive and proactive in making the lives of right-wing nut jobs miserable in that country, which is, to be hoped for. So maybe it's that too. But yes, we have to at least acknowledge what Ricky was saying. They got plenty of right-wing nut jobs. And we should be reminded of that if it even sounded like we forgot. So, anyway, back to the Intercept. Canada decided to require St. Kitts and Nevis citizens to obtain a visa to enter the country to properly determine the true identity of St. Kitts and Nevis passport holders, citing concerns about the issuance of passports and identity management practices within its citizenship by investment program, the same program the Crow family bought into just 2 years prior. So they knew some of these people could be from anywhere and just seeking to avoid sanctions or international alerts about them. I just live down in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's funny, you have an Iranian accent. Well, funny story about that. We should be doing the same. And as a matter of fact, Canada honestly should perhaps think about doing the same for people who were granted not passports, I guess, but green cards in the United States by virtue of their investment. Wasn't it like $500,000 or more in real estate there? So you remember the scheme, right? We'll sell you a luxury apartment for $500,000 and it comes with a green card. Anyway, it's a little different from passports necessarily. But anyway, good move by Canada there. In 2017, the State Department noted in a report on money laundering that St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship by investment program was afflicted by significant deficiencies in vetting candidates and conducting due diligence on passport and citizenship recipients after they received citizenship, and noted that the country was a desirable location for criminals to conceal proceeds. Still a pirate capital, I guess. The country remains on the State Department's 2021 list of high-risk jurisdictions due to the prevalence of money laundering. You get the idea. Is there any more? Well, here's some examples, I guess. In 2020, the Department of Justice indicted tech CEO Robert Brockman in what law enforcement officials called the largest ever tax charge in the United States. Prosecutors alleged that companies in Nevis that were key to the scheme were used to hide $2 billion of wealth from U.S. tax officials. Brockman died last year while still facing trial, so you can dump him in the ocean now, too. Last year, Armenia's then president, Armen Sarkisian, I think that doesn't look too hard. Armen Sarkisian abruptly resigned after a news outlet learned that he had secretly retained citizenship to St. Kitts and Nevis. And I mean, if you're the president, really, you should just be a citizen of that country. Sarkisian has said that he received the passport after he invested $500,000 in a luxury hotel on the island. Last month, a Senate Finance Committee report singled out the risks of high net worth individual dual citizens avoiding taxes. I mean, that's kind of obvious at this point, so I'm glad they did a report on it. The committee report points to a 40% reduction in IRS revenue since 2010. As a contributor to the problem and recommends fully funding the IRS. The Republicans, of course, absolutely opposed that and turned that into, what would they say? 800, how many agents they said were being trained to come in and seize all your assets and kick your doors down. But it was really about billionaires hiding their money in St. Kitts and Nevis and other places like that. And we were going to catch them. And then you all would have to pay less taxes, because billionaires would pay their fair share. Wouldn't that be nice? No, say Republicans. Several U.S. watchdog organizations, including POGO, have called for an investigation into the Supreme Court justices' alleged violations of the Ethics in Government Act. So there's that. Only really at this point the most tenuous connection to Thomas himself, although it's likely that should it ever come to the Supreme Court to decide questions of whether or not billionaires like Harlan Crow should be prosecuted for this kind of tax evasion, he is likely to say, no, it's terrible, because then they'll have less disposable income to spend on me and my vacation schedule. So basically that's what's going on there. All right, let's see. Other things to share as we approach the top of the hour break. We might have to go, back to the future. That is, back to the actual past, of course. Just to, this might make an interesting article, something I was holding on to for a while. Let's get it on the record and perhaps discuss it a little bit during the next segment if we run out of time, because it does have to do with those folks on Capitol Hill. Might be of some interest to Joan, or at least in passing. The Washington Post printed about 2 weeks ago the opinion piece by Danielle Allen, contributing columnist. Does it describe her expertise anywhere, maybe down at the bottom here? No. There must be something, though, somewhere. Well, maybe not, but she's listed as a contributing columnist, and this is one of those very fancied up with graphics things, the graphic presentation online at the Washington Post. But the opinion piece by Danielle Allen asks, can the Capitol hold a much bigger house? Yes, she says, and here's how it would look. And, let's see. What are we talking about? Expansion of the House of Representatives. People have talked about this several times, and we've brought it up occasionally on the show. Just that the proportion of constituents to representatives in the House in particular has gone askew since the Founding Fathers. The intent of the founders was that there be a much closer relationship between the House of Representatives members and their constituencies. But in order to keep the ratio anything close to like what it once was, would require an enormous expansion of the House, which, on the one hand you say, sure, why not? I mean, there's plenty of enormous legislative bodies out there. They don't work so great, but the one we have now doesn't work so great either. But then there's the question of, well, where would you put them all? Can you expand and still fit them in the building? That's a question all by itself. Well, anyway, this is how it's approached here. In recent installments of my series on renovating our democracy, that's what Danielle Allen has been up to, I have argued that increasing the size of the U.S. House of Representatives can help us achieve more inclusive, responsive, and energetic governance while reconnecting members to their constituents. This is the change we need, first and foremost. Many other important changes will flow from it. But growing the House in today's broken down politics might seem absurd or unfeasible, but it has plenty of precedent. And a closer connection between representatives and constituents was envisioned by the founders as a vital design principle of our system. During the Constitutional Convention, George Washington himself endorsed an amendment that would set a ratio of one representative per 30,000 constituents. That would be insane now, but Washington. So there you go. Here's how Washington's proposal compares to today's reality. Now it's time for fun graphics that, show how things were back then versus now. And this is supposed to be each square here representing 1,000 people. Well, how's it going? Well, the lowest ratio of all states is in Montana, where there's one representative for 540,000 people. In California, it's about average, where one representative represents about 760,000 people. And the highest ratio of all states, I don't know. Okay. All right. Yeah. So the least representative then is the one representative that Delaware has for its 990,000 people, or at least, are they one or two there? Is it just one? All right. Well, at any rate, yeah. So Delaware getting the raw end of that one, the short end of that stick. And hey, the president could do something about that. I don't know whether not unilaterally, obviously. But anyway, as we come up on our top of the hour break, we'll cram in just a little bit more. Give you something to think about while we're away for a minute, but we'll do it all over some music. A system requiring one person to represent the interests of almost 1 million people, as is the case in Delaware, would have troubled Washington, as it should us. But let's set this ratio aside for a moment. In a previous column, I argued for a bill put forward by Representative Earl Blumenauer of Oregon that would bring us to 585 seats, up from the 435 we currently have. And after that initial step up, we could transition to a cube root rule. We'll explain that perhaps after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio, where we're going to get into, I guess, the cube root rule. Who even knew that we were going there? What the hell is that about? And, well, you could ask I've already forgotten the name of our author. Danielle Allen or Earl Blumenauer, both of whom I guess are familiar with the math. What does this work? What does it mean? Again, this is about a increase in the size, or a potential increase in the size in the House of Representatives to make the body more representative and presumably therefore responsive to constituents. The idea being increasing the size of the House from 435 seats to 585. And after that initial step up, we could transition, it is said, to a cube root rule. What does that mean? It would be a rule pegging the number of House members to the cube root. Oh boy, don't ask me to explain that math, but you know how square roots work. Cube root is one step up from that, although never mind actually trying to explain the math of it. But all right. I guess that would be where the square root is what number times itself equals the number you're starting with. The square root of 9 being 3. 3 times 3 is 9. What number times itself 3 times would bring you back to the original number. And I don't know how to perform that in my head. But those of you who remember your high school, maybe, math, would remember all this. So what are we talking about? Pegging the number of House members to the cube root of the national population. Okay. Interesting figure to try to choose. This, all right. So we could transition to a cube root rule for growth in subsequent census years. So this would build in a continuing expansion of the number of members of the House every decade or so when the census is taken and we reapportion, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. So this way, the size of the House would increase continually with the population, but at a steady and manageable rate, as opposed to having to add 150 members right now to try and even get on the glide path to this cube root rule. Based on population projections, this would put us on a track for a Congress that would grow from 435 members of the House, anyway, to 585 to 736 over the next 40 years. I think it's plenty of time to get used to it. But, of course, for the past 40 years or so, we've been teaching kids the basic fact, the 435 members of the House. And now that goes out the window. So trivia answer that you have to forget about from here on in if we pass this rule. Anyway, what would happen, though, to the Capitol? Wouldn't we need a new building? Doesn't that make this impossible? All right, well, it's a good question. The Capitol has already undergone multiple expansions, it's pointed out here. In 1850, growth in its membership led to a major renovation project. By 1869, the work delivered the Capitol that we now know. But even after the Capitol was complete that year, the House continued to grow. In the 1870s, it grew from 243 to 293 members, continuing up to the current 435 established in the year 1929. Here are some beautiful pictures of the construction of the building and expansions and renovations, and it's fascinating. And now, here's the extraordinary thing. It still has room for more growth. Quite a bit of it. I engaged architect Michael Murphy to explore what's possible. Murphy is a visionary designer committed to architecture for the public good. How nice. He designed Bryan Stevenson's National Memorial for Peace and Justice, the memorial for lynching and racial violence victims, as it's better known, in Montgomery, Alabama. And here is a picture of some embedded views of, I guess, how he envisions expanding the house or where it is now and what's going to happen to it. Murphy and his team took the current dimensions of the house and halls shown in this image as a starting point. And then as you scroll, it tells you the chamber now comfortably accommodates about 450 people on the floor, with more than 400 in the gallery on the second level. So, the team's first idea was to create a new elevated section that could easily allow for seating up to 904 members. How interesting. So the elevated section alone would hold 904 of them. This image, you can't see it, but trust me, it shows the speaker's point of view. Consistency with the existing chamber aesthetics would probably make this scheme less contentious, making it more likely to gain wide support. So they don't radically alter the way we seat people or how it looks. It's just an expansion of the seating arrangement. Now, this is a very simple approach to expanding the space. It maintains the existing look and basic operation of the space, explained New York-based artist and architectural designer Samuel Stubblefield, who collaborated on the visualizations. The addition of a mezzanine becomes an extension of the existing floor. In another study, the team rearranged the seating in circular fashion. So a little bit more like the Imperial Senate in Star Wars, I guess, is what it sort of looks like, with a speaker's position in the center of it all. But that is a little weird and puts people behind him, but I don't think they care very much. They're probably looking at their phones the whole time anyway, or, I don't know, communicating with their flying cars. This arrangement would allow for seating up to 1,060 people, which, by the way, is great for COVID. Just wanted to throw that one in there. I hope they're working on the ventilation alongside all of this. The architects placed the speaker at the lowest point in the room to communicate a democratic egalitarian message in a country whose founding ethos involved the questioning of aristocracy and titles. So coming down from the elevated rostrum, which, I guess is inconsistent with all of that, but probably was just basic room design at the time. You want to elevate the speaker's rostrum. They are conducting the proceedings there, and you want everybody to be able to see them from wherever they might be seated. Anyway, More than that, moving away from a pulpit-style arrangement would change the dynamic of the room. The in the round format, not in and around, but in the round, as in theater in the round format, which presidents like George W. Bush and Obama often utilized in like town hall type gatherings, I suppose, provides a more conversational format and shows members together performing witness. Okay, Murphy said, that's very interesting. To my surprise and delight, Danielle goes on to say, the team's last proposal reveals that we could actually take the House of Representatives up to 1,725 members without having to construct a new building. That seems exciting, except a little unwieldy. But this would include a circular mezzanine, mirroring the geometry of the main floor to better tie the two levels together in a single integrated space. That's pretty wild. This is the view from the mezzanine. We are treated to that, and it looks like what it says. Remaining space on the second level could be used to accommodate visitors, conference rooms, and news organizations. These studies show it's physically feasible to substantially grow the chamber. But it's true that it can only grow so big. If we went with George Washington's proposal of one representative per 30,000 residents, today's 435 House members would become 11,063, with districts ranging from the size of a neighborhood in New York City to substantial parts of a state in sparsely populated regions. I'll be honest, I used to think the idea of a House of Representatives that was that large was crazy. But new artificial intelligence tools might actually make it necessary. How so? That's a good question. Proximity this close between representatives and constituents might turn out to be the only antidote to the problem of misinformation. That's a good thought. An interesting thought anyway. There's good news here too, however. Technology could not only bring about a need for this, but it might also deliver the tools for us to succeed at it. That is to say, to succeed at using it. That's interesting. Just as I reached out to an architect to think about the physical space in the Capitol, I reached out to a team of information architects, Ethan Zuckerman and Chand Rajendra Nicolucci. That's an interesting combination all by itself. Chand Rajendra Nicolucci, both at the University of Massachusetts Initiative for Digital Public Infrastructure. They believe 11,000 is possible and explained how. In keeping with the collaborative spirit of this project, let me quote them at length. Ready for this? Zuckerman and Rajendra Nicolucci write, rather than reconfiguring the Capital One Arena to host Congress when the Wizards are out of town, Congress people in this big house that's always a problem, would have home offices in their district, but conduct their legislative, investigative, and deliberative work online, as many of us have grown used to doing. While the task of virtualizing Congress sounds daunting, in a sense, it's not entirely different from the challenges large corporations have faced coordinating workflow between different offices. Asking Congress to work using Microsoft Teams or Google Workspace might not be a viable option, but it's a good starting point for information architects thinking about a Congress of over 11,000 members. This expanded Congress will need a workplace platform that allows committees to discuss and draft legislation, conduct investigations, and carry out the legislative business it has been charged with since 1789. It could draft legislation using tools similar to Google Docs, where different users can add comments and work at the same time. A very online Congress is likely to look a little bit like Reddit, a vast array of conversations focused on an impossible variety of topics, all of them fascinating to someone, not all of them fascinating to you. Now, a mock-up is presented visually of a forum where constituents could participate in the legislative process inspired by Reddit. That would be kind of interesting. And if you're only dealing with 30,000 of them per representative, maybe it could work. The Reddit analogy has additional importance for Congress as a deliberative space. Our founders saw Congress as a forum in which representatives from around the nation would come into conversation armed with their constituents' specific views, but capable of being swayed by the arguments of others. The major barrier to this plan's adoption would be the 435 existing congresspeople agreeing to share their status and power with more than 10,000 new members. Although, they share it right now with staffers who are unelected. Anyway, Zuckerman and Rajendra Nicolucci have an important point there. Growing the House means remaking the jobs of our representatives. It would force existing members to run for their seats in districts where they don't already know how to win. The smaller ratio between themselves and constituents would change expectations for their presence really, and the service they deliver. The number and nature of committee assignments would change. But good managers don't unilaterally change someone's job description. They take time to figure out what frustrations the person has with their job as constituted and what room for improvement they can see. We, the people, as managers who hire our representatives, should do the same. But that's work, so screw that. What do members themselves want to change about their jobs? They have many frustrations. In December, the House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress released an important report containing a number of recommendations to improve the functioning of Congress and the experience of being a member. Members find it hard to keep and recruit staff. They can just make them members instead, 10,000 of them. They would like affirmation, reward, and support for bipartisanship and collegiality. They, too, need respite from toxicity. That's not including Murdery Trader Green or Jim Jordan and others like him, Paul Gosar, in the news today. I'm sure we can find time to talk about that. They would like flexible and modern office designs and even hearing rooms that would permit a round table setting structure rather than a courtroom style. They are experimenting with technology and apps to improve room booking, bill tracking, and digital infrastructure for constituent services. They would like support to succeed at these aspects of their jobs and to master both the promise and peril of technology. They would love the chance to learn about legislative best practices from legislatures elsewhere, both in the states and internationally, and they, too, need professional development. I think all of that is a slam dunk. Oh, well, I don't. It's also part of the same renovation. All part of the same renovation. Imagining a different kind of Congress to get a better democracy goes beyond the physical space it occupies. The right number is not set in stone. Neither is the job itself. But this is at least clear. We can make it better to be in Congress, and we can make it better to be represented by Congress. So let's get on with it. Change is overdue. Very interesting. And good thoughts. And there's a whole series, and it's linked inside of here, so you can go and take a look at it and see if you can find your way to agreement with any of these principles. It would be very interesting. And I especially like the point of the idea that it might be the only remedy for the problem of misinformation and various, similar concepts. Like if you were representing only 30,000 people, you could, it would be more likely that you'd be able to get in closer and more direct contact with them to combat misinformation, at least about you, but certainly about everything else in the world too. It would be a lot easier to hear directly from your representative in Congress about what's happening in the world for real versus the misinformation. But I guess by the same token, if you have Murdery Trader Green, then I guess you'll have many more like her, possibly, in Congress, unless it's just impossible to divide things up into tranches of 30,000 voters and still, just 30,000 at a time, and still find enough kooks to, but it's got to happen somewhere, right? Anyway, I suppose it's possible then that the flip side of this is with 30,000 people only to contact, you could, Paul Gosar types and Murdery Trader Green types could bring people entirely under their sway. I don't know. I don't know whether we accommodate that or account for that in our thinking here in this, but I guess maybe we'll read through the rest of the series and see whether that's something they've contemplated. Why do I bring up Paul Gosar and the misinformation thing? Well, there's two directions we can transition in from this story, from things stored away in pocket. One maybe comes up in discussion with Joan later on. We'll see whether she has any interest in it. But Talking Points Memo brought this to the fore the other day. And, oh, hey, here's, well, I got two notes to bring up in passing. One, both involve two of my brothers, Harvey, whose birthday it is today, whose name doesn't get called all that often on the show, and but happy birthday, and Mark, whose name does get called an awful lot on the show because of all the articles that he's contributed especially in the last couple of weeks. And he says he's listening now. He's having some health misadventures. I think I can say that much without violating HIPAA, but not certain. And I guess I should have been more certain because he's telling me that he's listening now. And two nurses at the hospital, unfortunately, where he is right now, are listening along and enjoying it. So that's good news. And I hope we don't do anything else that does anything wrong and they, jab you with a needle or something unnecessary like that. But okay, maybe it'll help to mention that, and everybody will get excited about that, and they'll bring in extra pudding or something like that. We'll hope for the best. Okay, so where was I going? I just mentioned it because it came up on my screen as a text. So feel better quickly, please, Mark, and maybe the nurses there will help speed things along. I know that's their aim anyway. Okay. Now back to stuff that we know what we're talking about somewhat. I said that there were some things we should jump into here. Talking Points memo, I think originated this story, and I have since seen something from where the New Republic commenting on it. But let's go over to Talking Points memo, since I think they were the ones that broke the story. And it was Hunter Walker, yes, on the byline for this one. The exclusive yesterday, now everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got this on their minds. Capitol Hill staffer is a prominent follower of neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes. Oh dear, that gets the sad trombone, I think, for all of us. And also, much worse because, well, maybe the horror dramatic, really, because this is terrible. And I think at this point to be expected of Paul Gosar. But anyway, evidence shows Congressman Paul Gosar's digital director is behind an online persona that Fuentes called one of his, quote, strongest soldiers, which just tells you how weird and abnormal this whole thing really is. Hunter Walker reported this just the other day. Nick Fuentes, it begins, was under attack, as he should be. On May 6, 2022, two high-ranking members of Fuentes' white supremacist Groyper movement had defected from his organization and gone on a rival far-right streaming show to criticize Fuentes and air their grievances about the group. Fuentes responded 5 days later on his own stream, America First. After denouncing his enemies, Fuentes raised his hand and made a demand from his remaining followers. Now it's time to pledge your allegiance to me forever, okay? Fuentes declared, and the answer to that is always no, not a chance in hell. And to the extent that we have anything to do with America and patriotism, we should recognize that immediately as extraordinarily dangerous and get back around to dumping you in the ocean. Fuentes was seated in front of a digital studio backdrop with a Russian flag bearing the Z insignia used by supporters of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine in the corner of his screen. And that, too, should be a giant red flag, but it is, in fact, red, white, and blue, ironically enough. And, I mean, come on. What do you need to know before it's time for you to leave? That a guy is sitting there with a Russian flag saying it's time for you to pledge your allegiance to me forever. No, dump that guy in the ocean. Always is the answer. Fuentes was seated in front of this stupid thing, and in a chat feed alongside the host, messages from viewers poured in. They took Fuentes' oath via emoji. I mean, I guess that's not binding. But anyway, sending in row after row of cartoon hands. One audience member who pledged fealty to Fuentes used the handle chicken with two Ks for some reason and no second C. CHIKKEN. A wrench icon next to their name indicated they were a moderator in the chat room for Fuentes' streams. Chicken sent in multiple hand emojis, signaling their loyalty to Fuentes as he elaborated on the pledge. Raise your right hand. I swear my undying... Look, how could you even contemplate even asking this, much less complying with it? I swear my undying allegiance to Nicholas J. Fuentes and the America First movement, so help me God, Fuentes said. Continuing to recite his pledge, how egotistical is that? Raise your hand, hold it high. I swear I will defend the white race, my nation America, and my Savior Jesus Christ, and my loyalty to the America First movement. Nicholas J. Fuentes, so help me God. It's not even a good oath. As the emojis continued to roll in from idiots who should be immediately arrested, Fuentes punctuated his oath by crossing his arms across his chest, as he often does, unleashing racial slurs. What more do you want from we got the N-word popping up here. What more do you want from a N-word? What more do you want? He asked that same thing twice. It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand where he's coming from, but okay. Many of his followers were clearly on board. In addition to the emojis, they sent in paid super chats, whatever that's supposed to mean, that allowed them to display a note on the screen alongside Fuentes. Oh, I see. You pay for the ability to own. It's kind of interesting. And Scott Anderson was just asking me about ways we could expand our operation and perhaps monetize a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to swear personal fealty to me, but he did mention some interesting alternatives or that we ought to be thinking about things like that. That'd be interesting, though, if I went to a video format, although Greg would immediately quit. I wouldn't blame him, but maybe we can work something out. But a video format where you can get your comments on screen. But I hate making anybody pay for anything. But, it's a good idea if you want to give money to, people who help the show, like Scott. So, it's a motivated thing, but it's helpful for all. And, of course, in no small part would help me justify my spending this amount of time on it here at home every time we discuss things like, oh yeah, now we have to pay for a second kid to go to college. Anyway, never mind. This is about the white supremacists we all hate. Let's get back on that page. These paid messages are a staple of Fuentes' broadcasts on Cozy TV, the video platform Fuentes launched after he was suspended from YouTube for violations of its hate speech policy in 2020. Fuentes read these super chats aloud. Most of the donors gave a few dollars, but one who used the handle Chicken Right, there's additional on top of chicken, gave an especially generous gift, $150, along with a note that gushed to Fuentes, "You are our voice." Maybe I will have you all pledge personal fealty to me. This looks very valuable. Chicken and Chicken Right were aliases associated with a social media persona that became relatively prominent in the Groyper movement between 2020 and last year. As he gave thanks for the donations, Fuentes indicated his personal familiarity with Chicken Right. Thank you so much, Chicken Right. And here I am just thanking people nicely for their donations via, all the various things we use to take this in, but Patreon being the recurring one. And here I could have been asking for personal fealty along all this time, and I've missed out. Anyway, thank you so much, Chicken Right. Fuentes said, Chicken Right, one of the best. Thank you so much, King. Of course, it's Fuentes who's king in all of this. The Chicken Right persona was a unique figure in the Groyper movement. Fuentes' core audience is made up of young, alienated Zoomers who watch his hours-long streams. I mean, if it's more than 2, then I guess he's got me beat, in which he rails against minorities and gays. Oh, I would need extra time to fit that in. Anyway, but Chicken Right wasn't just some kid tuning into Fuentes' fringe online world from a basement, though he might have been in the basement. Evidence indicates Chicken Right has a real job in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. TPM has uncovered an extensive digital trail of interconnected Groyper social media pages using variations of the Chicken Right and Chicken handles that can be linked to Wade Searle. Searle? I don't know how he pronounces it, but we should arrest him and give him a new name. Searle. Wade Searle, maybe, who works as the digital director for Representative Paul Gosar of Arizona, one of the most extreme far-right members of Congress. Chicken Right's postings on far-right websites and Searle's alleged involvement with Fuentes occurred before and after he started working in Gosar's Capitol Hill office. Gosar, his chief of staff, his press secretary, and Searle have not responded to multiple detailed requests for comment. Fuentes is one of the far-right leaders who gained prominence during the Trump era. His open embrace of Nazism and usage of racial epithets is extreme even within this alt-right movement. The revelation that a devotee of Fuentes appears to have infiltrated a congressional office represents a previously unknown and unseen degree of influence for the modern white supremacist movement. I will mention to you, since we won't get a chance to actually read it, who else was covering this today, commenting on it? From the New Republic, pointed out, question mark really about the use of the word infiltrated, because Paul Gosar himself might actually consider it a good acquisition, like an enhancement of his office rather than an infiltration of it, to have one of these groypers working inside it. Well, the revelation then of this infiltration, I did read that sentence. In an interview with TPM, it's Nicole Hemmer, a historian at Vanderbilt University who focuses on conservatism in the far right, said it would be pretty extreme for Gosar to have a groyper activist in his office. So, of course, naturally, I'm sure he's happy about it. We'll be back in 2 minutes after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, well, I still have the music down here. It being a Tuesday, I don't know what's going on over at Daily Coast, but occasionally we do have these situations with Joan where either she's called in to do some quick updates or just has something go on in the house and one of the dogs, cats, birds, elephants, whatever the menagerie needs taken care of. Somebody needs some help. Something's going on. Or just plain, hey, I forgot it was Tuesday. All thoroughly excusable. I totally understand. It's very early on the West Coast still. So, you're certainly welcome to join us at any time, and I'm happy to continue going on about this Paul Gosar staffer at length, honestly. And anytime you want to join us, if that's possible, A-okay with us. Or, hey, if things get crazy, you're excused one more time. And I will just remind everybody of what we were going to talk about. Definitely going to be bringing up the debt ceiling, and that could be demanding your attention right now, as we are down to like 30 seconds or so left of time before we hit the debt ceiling, during which both houses of Congress, who are responsible for finding a solution to this, will actually be in session at the same time. But first, I guess we'll continue on with this story about Wade, what was his name, Searle or something like that, Searle, Searle is the pronunciation we'll go with, working for Paul Gosar. We were getting an explanation from Nicole Hemmer, the historian at Vanderbilt University, who says that the groypers, which is what this guy calls himself a part of this group, they are essentially the equivalent of neo-Nazis. I mean, it's not equivalent. They just are neo-Nazis. They are attached to violent events like January 6th. Nick Fuentes, as sort of the organizers of the groypers, expresses Holocaust denialism, white supremacy, white nationalism, pretty strong anti-women bigotry. He calls for a kind of return to 12th century Catholicism. And I wouldn't even blame the Catholics for that at this point. But they're an extremist group that is okay with violence. A kind of even sub-rosa identification of Groypers as congressional aides is the same as having Holocaust deniers, alt-righters, or, Aryan Nations people, Hemmer added. It's as extreme and as racist as you get in the United States. While Hemmer noted that, particularly in the 19th century, members of Congress were associated with the Klan or other racist groups, she described the situation with Gosar's office as unprecedented in the modern era. There were a few members of Congress in the 1990s who had loose ties to militia groups, but nothing like this, said Hemmer, who recently authored a book on conservatism during that period. Gosar has his own direct links to Fuentes. This is a surprising connection for a sitting congressman, given the extreme nature of Fuentes' activism, although one might wonder whether there would be 1,000 of them in a house of 11,000 or whatever we end up landing on. Anyway, Fuentes attended the 2017 neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, was present at the Capitol on January 6th, and has made remarks attacking women, warning against Jewish control of politics, using the N-word, and praising Hitler, among other things. Throw him in the ocean. The congressman has repeatedly generated controversy and condemnation by alternatively cozying up to and distancing himself from the white supremacist leader. Gosar appeared at the last two editions of Fuentes' America First conferences. He showed up in person at the event at 2021. Gosar also delivered a video message the following year. When his taped 2022 address to the conference caused an uproar, Gosar insisted it was a mistake that stemmed from a miscommunication among his staff, who were actually part of the group. What a miscommunication that was. Gosar also made social media posts promoting Fuentes. In July of 2021, he wrote the FBI on congressional letterhead criticizing Fuentes' inclusion in a no-fly list as an abuse of power. Though apparently it's really not. But the presence of a prominent Groyper in Gosar's office would indicate the congressman's ties to the white supremacist movement are far deeper than previously known. Online, Chicken Right built a following of more than 20,000 people on far-right websites while posting extremist, anti-Semitic, racist, and anti-vaccine content. Great. Surly, or whatever his name is, who graduated high school in 2021... and really shouldn't be working on Capitol Hill just yet, but hey, has worked in Gosar's staff since November of that year. According to the Congressional Directory Legistorm, Searle rose from being a temporary employee to becoming the congressman's digital director in May of 2022. During his time working for Gosar, Searle has served as the main contact on official press releases and represented the congressman at events in his home state of Arizona. So I do think he's a little young to be there, and certainly in a position of any influence or prominence, which for a nutcase like Gosar, I guess a digital director actually is. Probably a lower ranking staffer for most other members of Congress, but Gosar sort of lives his life in the digital space and not much else. So I guess it's a little bit more important. Ordinarily, it's a pretty highly competitive job environment for which a college degree would be more or less expected, but not necessarily required. And hey, here comes Joan. Hey, good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. My apologies. I was just finishing up the story.
Okay. We covered for you the best we could. Could be a busy time, and it's probably because, as I said, there's now down to about 15 seconds left before the debt ceiling.
something like that, yeah.
Okay. So is that what the nature of the story you were working on, or something else?
It is indeed the debt ceiling, because what else is there?
There's the neo-Nazi in Paul Gosar's office, but I don't mean
neo-Nazi in Paul Gosar's office.
Yeah, besides Paul Gosar, of course. There's no getting rid of Paul Gosar from Paul Gosar's office. I mean, they could expel him, and they should, but they won't. But it turns out there's a second neo-Nazi there. Who also
At
works
least.
for him. Yeah,
At
right.
least one.
That's the one we're aware of, and I'm sure we'll find more in the next week as they say, no, we're not firing him. We're all neo-Nazis here. So, anyway, I think everybody gets basically the point of that, which is that Paul Gosar needs to go far away from Congress as quickly as possible, but no chance of expelling him in this atmosphere, especially when, that would actually jeopardize their majority. If they got rid of all the neo-Nazi members of Congress, Democrats would be in the majority. So
they pretty much would, yeah.
Yeah. That's
but
their working coalition.
You certainly can't blame Democrats for being frightened by this.
No. I had been concentrating for most of this time on Murdery Trader Green as being the Q assassin with a member's pin who would be admitted to the floor carrying God knows what in her purse or on her person.
Along with Lauren Boebert.
Sure.
Who has a gun fetish.
Right. Absolutely. But as it turns out, it probably became obvious a while ago. Gosar is a special case, to say the least. And somebody who, honestly, you'd pick out of a crowd as being, hey, that guy just has like that disturbing appearance and inability to relate on a personal level to people around him. He's disassociative and weird and dangerous in his ideas, and maybe as likely, if not more likely, really, honestly, I would say, even than Marjorie Taylor Greene, to actually try to perpetrate a terrorist attack on the floor of the House.
Yeah. There's something performative about Greene and Boebert both.
Yeah, and ultimately they don't want to land in jail, probably, whereas Gosar's the kind of guy who, I don't know. I mean, if I want to make wild accusations, if I have to pick a member of Congress most likely to put on an explosive vest and go to the floor, Paul Gosar. Yeah. So,
yay.
There you go. And now he's got groypers in his office who may or may not come to the floor with him. He can bring people like that past security and onto the floor, nobody checking him. And what can I tell you? That's bad.
And they don't even have metal detectors
anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So you don't even have to sneak around them. They took those down. So, do they have bomb sniffing dogs around anywhere? I don't know. They probably should. They should have a little guard post outside of Gosar's office, and tell him it's for his own protection because they think he might be a target. But smell everybody coming in. And going out.
I was in D.C. working on the Hill when the whole Gingrich revolution happened, and it was bad.
Yes.
And relations between people in the two parties was really bad, interpersonal relations. People were pissed at each other. They were cranky. It was awful. Mm-hmm. But they weren't terrified of their Republican colleagues.
Yeah. Nobody thought they would.
There's good reason for a lot of members, AOC at the top, to be frightened physically.
Yeah. Oh,
and
absolutely.
Concerned about what these people might do.
I mean, Gosar already, has gotten himself in trouble for circulating videos of him cartoonishly beheading AOC. Murdery Trader Green had, before she even arrived in Congress, was videotaping herself following both AOC and Ilhan Omar around on Capitol, and right to the point where the video of her screaming through the mail slot of the locked door of AOC's congressional office. I can't believe that didn't get her arrested or put on a terrorist watch list, honestly. That's about as close as you get to actually just attacking a member of Congress. They lock the doors to keep you out, and you start sticking your face and fingers through the mail slot, the only part of the door that will open up, asking her to come out and play. Yeah. Well, not only did she not get arrested, she later got elected to Congress. And then I thought she was one of the greatest threats on the floor, but that's because we didn't know about Paul Gosar yet. Now we do. And we're supposed to also negotiate with him on the debt ceiling.
Yes.
By the way, if he doesn't murder you first, then you have to sit down and negotiate the fate of the World Economic Order with him. If he'll even look you in the eye at any point during the discussion, which he won't. So anyway, that's happening regardless of what happens with Paul Gosar. We also have this other problem.
There's going to be a debt default in anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 weeks.
Yeah, possibly by the end of the show.
June 15th seems to be the absolute outside date.
Okay, all right.
June 1st seems a lot likelier.
From so what gives us anything from 2 weeks to a month.
we've heard revenues were great, and we've heard revenues were not as great as they should have been. So I think revenues were not as great as they should have been, and we're probably looking at closer to June 1st than June 15th.
Yes.
Or Yellen could just be trying to make them panic.
Could be. But either way, we'd have longer if a lot of billionaires didn't have their money hidden in St. Kitts and Nevis and other places like that. So, but I guess if the worldwide economic order collapses, I suppose, having your money in a bank in St. Kitts and Nevis won't do you much good either. But if it's just the United States that collapses, Harlan Crow doesn't care. He sets sail on his evil billionaire yacht to his volcano lair, and presumably
takes Clarence with him.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's an upside. We replace him. He's just not showing up for meetings, so we got to get a new justice in here.
But I don't think that would work. We could try.
No, I don't think so either. But
they would probably let him work remotely.
Yeah, maybe from a volcano, possibly. Okay. So, I don't know. What else do we say about there's danger, of course, as there always is with deadlines like this and the worldwide economic picture on the line, that will somehow give up too much to hostage takers?
There's very much that danger.
Oh, no.
And, we've already seen the White House keep saying, we're not negotiating the debt ceiling. We're not negotiating the debt ceiling. They're negotiating the debt ceiling. They're trying to hide behind the semantics of saying, well, we're negotiating the budget and the debt ceiling is a sidecar negotiation. No.
Yeah. Well, all right. I mean, I guess I kind of expected as much as...
Yeah.
You can't just sit there and literally do nothing, but... It's not great. Of what any indication of what's in the greatest danger?
Some potential work requirements. Not on Medicaid. On Sunday, Biden told reporters that, I voted for stricter work requirements back when I was in the Senate. The Clinton welfare reform.
Yeah.
He walked back.
Not a selling point.
He walked that back a little bit. What the Republicans want to do is extend. There's already a work requirement on food stamps.
Right. Okay.
For people, childless adults under age 50, they have to show that they're working in order to get food stamp assistance, or that they can't work at all, or are disabled.
Yes.
Republicans want to up that age to 55 rather, and they want to increase or restrict states from being more flexible in that during economic emergencies. States and local areas now can say, look, we've got this economic emergency right now. We have very high unemployment in this region or this county. We need to lessen those restrictions on food stamps. And the House Republicans want to take that flexibility away. As well as making, older people who have a hard time working in order to eat.
I don't know what they think they get out of it, but okay.
And I don't know whether that Biden, made that remark on Sunday and then it was sort of walked back, and he tweeted yesterday that, we shouldn't make it harder for older people to eat.
Yes. That would be bad.
Whether that's a denunciation of what he said on Sunday, I don't know, but that's where we're at there. The White House is also supposedly open to 2 years worth of budget caps, spending caps. House Republicans want 10.
All right. There's some space between there. But, wow. All right. Well, 10 years of budget caps.
There's definitely negotiating happening, and you can semantically say it's not the debt ceiling, it's the budget, but, it's the debt ceiling, it's the hostage. So there we are.
So, yeah, I guess that does, like you say, semantically it works. I'm not negotiating about the debt ceiling. They're going to raise it, but in exchange for what? Yeah. Well, okay, that's negotiating on the debt ceiling. That's kind of what everybody was talking about. But, and I was just reminded as you were saying what the demand was on the work requirements. Interesting, because you had mentioned earlier, that you were on Capitol Hill during the the Gingrich Republican Revolution, and so it's not that long ago, obviously, and it just occurs to me that the Republican mantra at the time was, we need to take these federal programs and send them to the states, or give flexibility to the states, and block grant everything.
Block grants.
And give them and then let them make decisions at the state level about conditions on the ground. And now, of course, we did give in to that, and we did let them do that. And now Republicans say, you know what? Actually, I don't think we should be giving flexibility at all to the states. After all, that was our whole thing. And either that actually sucked and didn't work and we're backtracking. No, it's just really what they're saying is, well, if we got a Republican president and a Republican state wants that flexibility, maybe we'll give it to you. But if a Democratic governor wants that flexibility, then, sorry, hands are tied. We passed this new law in order to keep the debt ceiling afloat, and you're out of luck. But Ron DeSantis can do whatever he wants, provided he's not the president doing it.
Which is, that's the case on abortion rights.
Yeah.
They don't want it to be state rights. They want a national ban.
Yeah.
We have a potential shadow docket ban on assault weapons bans.
A ban on assault weapons
There's a ban
bans, yes.
banning a ban.
Okay, I guess so. Oh.
So on guns, they might, so much for states' rights if the Supreme Court decides in the shadow docket that states can't do that, can't say you can't have assault weapons.
Yeah.
States' rights is a good excuse for Republicans, but they don't really believe that.
No, apparently not. And they don't believe in anything in particular. I mean, the idea was, we'll devolve government down from the federal level to the states and even to localities. But now between that, and since we're on the topic of guns, we find all the time state legislatures in Republican states where they have supermajorities now say, localities can't actually legislate on guns. That has to be set at the state from a one-size-fits-all, top-down directive point of view. We here with the supermajority say, wherever there might be blue enclaves, no safety from guns for you. You have to listen to the Republican point of view on that and live by it. So, states' rights, no, that's out the window. Devolving government down to the local level, no, back up to the states, top down. If wherever we have a supermajority as Republicans, that's the level of government that should be supreme. They just hand themselves
Speaking
the
of
keys.
Which, there's also that independent state legislature theory out there in the Supreme Court that we're not sure what's going to happen with.
Sure. So you can hand yourself the ability to, you can actually, that's their only backdoor into running the federal government from state legislatures where they have supermajorities. But we also want to be, sure, we can do whatever we want in the states, but that leaves us without the ability to seize total control of the federal government. How can we engineer that? Well, there's really no way, and founders would never have agreed to it.
But we can control federal elections.
Sure. And then we can engineer a supermajority for ourselves who will give us the ability to then do these things at the federal level. Wow, what fun. It's a good thing we have a bunch of originalists standing in the way.
Isn't it?
But some of them might be working from volcanoes at some point. Wow. Not great.
No, things are not great right now. It's a little scary right now.
Yeah.
And Democrats need to listen to the bloggers when we tell them things like, you really need to take the debt ceiling hostage away from Republicans while you can.
Yes.
Next time, just listen to us. Listen to us next time.
Yeah. Although, I feel like we've warned them about this in past debt ceiling confrontations as well. And I guess they probably figured, well, I'm still here, so they must have been wrong.
They must have been wrong.
We were in
They are
fact
very
right.
slow learners.
You just survived for different reasons. But okay, it would be nice.
It would be nice. And it would also be really nice if Biden would just say, okay, this just can't happen. I'm pulling the 14th Amendment constitutional argument and doing it on my own. I see far less danger in him doing that than pretty much any other scenario I see here.
Oh, well, certainly there are people who perhaps were dependent on the food stamps program to eat and live who will come to that realization too. It would have been better. I didn't really care that much. I can't eat the 14th Amendment. You should have done that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, scary. And I guess, I mean,
yeah,
within the next 2 weeks, we'll figure this out.
Supposed to leave tomorrow for Japan to the G8 summit. And then travel for like a week. We've got recess coming up. I think recess is probably going to be canceled unless, Democrats completely capitulate and we get a deal this week.
Oh boy. That's actually quite scary now that you mention it. The way, when it comes out like that, well, there's supposed to be a recess, but it might be canceled unless, of course, they surrender, in which case they can then go on their vacation.
Because how much they hate to shorten their recess.
Yes. And, not a vacation, et cetera, per se. But it's still something that they hate to cancel. And there's lots of travel involved, in some cases overseas.
And it's Memorial Day, and
you gotta be at
and politicking. And,
sure.
Yeah.
It's an important election year kind of a thing, even though it's, not an election year, but they all are at this point. And you got to show up for your Memorial Day functions in order to, make it look like things are under control and that there's going to be a government next week. Okay. Yeah, that's dangerous and is sometimes the strongest leverage people have for getting the worst things done. And every time I try to talk myself out of believing that they would do that, I think about not calling witnesses because Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And now, there really are people who are in the positions of power running this stuff who are like, what? The Republicans are bad?
Dick Durbin and blue slips.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That I know we've told them before, and it still doesn't work.
He's still sort of hemming, hawing, thinking, well, maybe we'll get rid of him. Maybe we'll get rid of him.
Perhaps at some future date. I don't know. Anything else we should sneak into? We should be keeping an eye on. I don't even know. I mean, what else do you tell people at this point?
I don't. What else is happening? There are other things happening. I have a hard time keeping track of it all.
I know that you had written at
Giuliani,
some point.
you covered him.
Yes, right. And
did you cover James Comer and his
we
disappearing
mentioned
witnesses?
That yesterday. Greg had mentioned that in passing. That so he just did this whole sort of I'm totally going to drop the bombshell that's going to prove the Bidens are corrupt, and then decided I don't actually have any of the proof.
Really have any of that, and then 2 days later comes up with the excuse, the dog ate my homework excuse of, I lost the whistleblower. Wait, did he lose the whistle? No, he lost the informant.
Okay.
He still has the whistleblower.
All right. But I mean, lost, like, he wasn't, keeping him in the office and feeding him there. But I mean, how do you lose? Would you lose touch with the person? Just stop responding? I'm not even sure exactly what happened. I just heard that we can't track him down.
That's what he told Maria. I can't say her name. Bartiromo?
Bartiromo, I think.
Bartiromo.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have a hard time with that one, but
can't track down the informant. Like that was definitely one of the first things it said. So your name is what, and how can we reach you? And did they lose the number, or is he not answering? I'm not certain which it is.
Well, there's the hint that it's he's an international spy.
Oh, okay.
And you know how spies are.
Yes, right.
They just go dark.
Right. Okay.
Or get rubbed out by the Biden crime family.
Yeah, I guess that's a possibility. Or, how do we know that people didn't reveal his identity on Discord or something and he got killed? We don't know. But
so we have a lost witness, supposedly.
Sure.
What we have is
he totally was going to do the thing where he was going to do
totally
the thing.
had all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
He had all those wire transfers. He had all of those bank records, except that he didn't.
Yeah. Well, that's a good
The informant
excuse.
must have taken him with him wherever the informant has gone.
Okay. Maybe to the enclave outside Moscow, where they're rumored to be getting ready to accommodate all the Americans and Canadians, as it turns out, ready to abscond from their countries with, I don't know what, information, money, not sure.
Guns.
Yeah, I guess so. But by the way, good luck keeping them in Russia. And good luck not finding yourself drafted to fight in Ukraine.
Maybe that's what the plan is.
Yeah.
All these Americans and Canadians come over with their guns and get conscripted.
Yeah. Right, because it can't depend on Wagner Group anymore, because they may or may not be betraying Putin, or somebody just lying about that and trying to get Putin to kill him. I don't know. It's complicated. If you thought the debt ceiling was tough, please go to the enclave outside Moscow and see how it goes. I don't know. It doesn't sound good. But that meanwhile puts us in the position of saying, stay tuned one more time, and next week we totally will know something. But I guess not. We have 2 weeks, right, until
we have 2 weeks.
First
until
deadline.
X date.
Okay. Do you have any vacations planned between now and then?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll just check in for sure. And man, that's going to be some kind of, well, we'll see how it shakes out in the next 2 weeks. And it's starting to look like there are people who are willing to throw others under the bus, I guess.
That's what it's starting to look like.
Okay, well, yeah, don't respond to any invitations to go to Moscow. And if anybody invites you to a bus depot, stay away. And I don't know what other warning signs there are. But okay, well, thanks, Joan, for keeping us up to speed and up to date on this. It's important to know what people are threatening to, or, darkly hinting will be traded away in exchange for the hostage of the debt ceiling. We always kind of knew there would be something, but we were
call your
hoping for
Democratic
others.
reps and senators.
Yeah.
And what the hell, call the White House.
Sure, let them know. Stand strong the best they can, and we'll watch along with the rest of us and give you the tally as it runs up. Thanks, Joan. Take
You're
care.
welcome.
Check in next week.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now for you to listen to Justice Putnam at the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. The thing we didn't get to. Thank God he saved our bacon once again, starting off in his Bistro Cafe. Appropriate place for that bacon. There is no there in the Durham probe. Yes, John Durham finally issued his report. Justice brings that next.